Okay. Many questions arise from the giving of the 10 Devarim. They're also known as the 10 words, the 10 categories, the 10 commandments, the 10 suggestions. Even Ezra asked, how can I am Yahweh your God be considered one of the commandments, seeing that it neither enjoins a positive duty nor expresses a prohibition? In verses 2 and 3, God speaks in the first person. From then on, he is spoken of in the third person. There are noticeable differences between the 10 words in Shemot, that's Exodus, and the 10 words in Devarim, which is Deuteronomy. The pseudo lays them out as follows. I have, of course, changed some of the things that he said, some of the words, to make what he said make some sense to those of us who are hearing it. Just saying. He said the variations of form can be classified as follows. A, the addition or omission of the connecting vav. B, the substitution of synonymous expressions like remember and observe. Let me give you an example. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Well, you can hear as in you heard it with your ears. You can hear as in you understood what was said, and you can hear as in you obeyed what was said. In Hebrew, you have to do all three to actually hear. In English, you can do all three independently, correct? So in one translation, it may say hear, and in the next, like say in Shemot, Exodus, it may say hear, and Devarim or Deuteronomy, it may say obey. Now, they're not wrong, they just don't read the same in English. That's what he's talking about. C, the variation in the order of the words. One may start with you shall not kill, and then say steal, and the next one maybe says don't steal, then don't kill. Okay, so there's a variation in the order of the words. D, expressions for the sake of giving details. For example, your livestock in Shemot or Exodus, or your ox, your donkey, and your cattle in Devarim or Deuteronomy. You see, they're both saying the same thing. It's just one tries to clarify, the other one is just an overview, if you will. Changes in the content are found in two places, speaking of the 10 words. A, in the reason given for the precept of the Shabbat, and B, in the stating of the reward for honoring the father and the mother. So there are some differences there. So he's laid all of that out. Then he explained it this way. In the book of Exodus, it is narrated that the Lord proclaimed the Decalogue, that's the 10 Commandments, to the people of Israel at the revelation on Mount Sinai. Now they call the giving of the Torah the revelation. A lot of scholars do that, so I thought I'd better point that out. Then he says whilst, which of course means while. In the book of Deuteronomy, we are told that Moses reminded the people after 40 years of what happened at that time. So remember, one of them is you're getting the word from God himself, and the other one is 40 years later, and Moshe is trying to remind them. So what's he doing? Well, he's paraphrasing. When Moses reminds the people of God's words, Kasuto said, he does not repeat them exactly. Hence, there is no reason for surprise at the changes in the form. On the contrary, it would be surprising if everything were iterated with complete exactitude. In other words, he's saying we shouldn't be surprised that the two stories differ. One is happening at the time, and the other one's 40 years later coming from memory. And he says it would be weirder if we looked at it and they both were exactly the same. All right. There are differing versions of the 10 words, the 10 commandments. The Jewish version, the first one is, I am Yahweh your God. Hashem, Adonai, the Lord your God, because they don't say God's name anymore. Well, most of them don't. So there's the first one. The second one is no other gods before me. The third one is you shall not make a graven or a 3D image. The fourth one is remember the Sabbath. 5 is honor your parents. 6 is do not murder. 7 is do not commit adulteries. 8 is do not steal. 9 is no false witness. And 10 is do not covet. Mine varies from that. The first one I say is, I am Yahweh your God, which is the same as theirs. But then the second one is, you'll have no other gods before me, which I believe is the same as theirs. And then we differ on the third. I say, don't take Yahweh's name in vain, or to vain, as it actually says. Then it's all the same from there on. Remember the Sabbath, honor your parents, no murder, no adultery, no stealing, no false witness, no covet. So I split it out differently. There are other versions. Philo had his version in the first century. Christians have, depending on what Christian organization is, the Catholics have a very different one than the evangelicals do. Just look them up. They're all very different. And if you look, you'll notice there's what, at least 20 laws in the 10 Commandments? Yeah, so anyway, we'll talk about that. At this point, I'm going to read Shemot, that's Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 23. Now, some of you are saying, wait, Rob, I have 26 verses. Well, then you're busted. You're reading a Christian Bible. You need to know this because the Jewish Bible has 23 verses and the Christian Bible has 26. So the Jews threw something out? No, the Jews broke up the verses, what we like to call the right way, and then the Christians, not so much. Anyway, it's all the same words, they're just divided up differently. So let's cover ourselves and prepare for a very long reading of the scriptures today. Again, it's Shemot, chapter 20, verses 1 through 23. Verse 1. Va yedaber Elohim et kol ha-devarim ha'eleh lemor. Verse 2. Anochi Yahweh Elohecha asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avodim. Lo yiyeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. Lo ta'aseh lecha tesel lechol temuna asher bashamayim mima'al va'asher ba'aretz mitachat va'asher ba'amim ba'mayim rather mitachat la'aretz. Lo tacheve. Sorry, that one's a stumbler. Lachem ve'lo ta'avdem ki anochi Yahweh Elohecha Elkana poked avon avot al banim al shelishim ve'al ribeim leshonai ve'oshe chesed la'alapim le'ohavai u'leshomrei mitzvotai. Lo tisa et shem Yahweh Elohecha lashav ki lo yenakeh Yahweh et asher yisa et shemo lashav. Zahor et yom hashabat le'adesho sheshet yamim ta'avod ve'asita kol melachtecha beyom hashvi'i shabbat la Yahweh Elohecha lo ta'aseh kol melachach ata uvicha uvitecha aved. Give me a second. I got to reset here. Avdecha va'amacha uvehem techa vegercha asher vish'arecha. Wow. Ki shishet yamim asa Yahweh et hashamayim ve'et ha'eretz et hayam ve'et kol asher bam vayanach vayom hashvi'i al ken berach Yahweh et yom hashabbat vayet. Oh, good Lord. Vayet Kad shehu. Kabed et abicha ve'et imecha lema'an ya'arichun Yamecha al ha-adama asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach. Now we're at verse 13. You're all like, oh my God, I can't believe it's not over. In verse 13 is where it changes up, because verse 13 in the Jewish version, they are combining what in the English version would be 13, 14, 15, and 16. This is where it differs. So 13 in the Jewish version is lo tir zach lo tin'af lo tignov lo ta'ane ve're'acha ed shaker. So that got us all the way through 16. So then the next one, 14, is 17 in the Christian Bible. Lo tachmod beit re'echa lo tachmod eshet re'echa ve'avdo va'amato ve'shoro v'chamoro ve'chol asher le're'acha. Ve'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot ve'et halafim fidim ve'et kol hashofar ve'et hahar ashen va'yar ha'am va'yanavu va'ya'amdu merachot va'yomru el Moshe daber ata imanu ve'nishma'a ve'al yedaber imanu el. Oh, good God. I'm sorry. I just don't know why I can't read today. I'm trying to get ahead of myself. Imanu is where I left off. Elohim fen namut. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am al tira'u ki leva'avur nasot etchem ba ha'elohim u va'avur te ye yir ato al penechem levilti techa tavu vaya amod ha'am merachok u'Moshe nigash el ha'arafel asher sham ha'elohim vayomer Yahweh el Moshe kol tamar el bnei Yisrael atem re'item ki min hashamayim di barti imachem lo ta'asun iti Elohei chesef velohei zahav lo ta'asu lachem mitzbach adama te ta'ase li vezabachta alaiv et olotecha ve'et shelamecha et zoncha ve'et bekarecha behol hamakom asher azkir et shemi avo elecha uverachtiha ve'im misbach avanim ta'ase li lo tivne et hen gazit ki harbe ha henafta alecha vatechal leha velo ta'ale v'ma'alot al mitzbechi asher lo tigale vatecha alayl. You may be seated. I apologize for that. Just get in a hurry, trying to get it over with, and then mess it all up. The microphone's messed up. Wow. All discombobulated there. Okay. So we were going to begin with the very first word, Shemot, chapter 20, verse 1. My translation of the Hebrew text is, and God spoke all these words saying. It's pretty much going to say that in everybody's translation. It's pretty straightforward. Now in verse 2, you have to realize that this is the groom, that would be God, and he is introducing himself with what we call the first davar, the first word, because there's 10 davarim, that's davar in plural. So here's your first word. The first word. Did I mention it's the first word? It's Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 20. Literally it says, I am Yahweh, God's you, which made go out you from land Mitzrayim, from house imposed servitude. Okay, so the first word is Anochi, I am. It's truly, Ani is the more common word, Anochi is the more kingly word, but it's just me, myself, I. It's all about me, right? Because it's just the word I. The next word is the proper name of God, Yahweh. The word after that is Eloheha. Literally, it's God's you. We would say your God. So God, it's the word for God, but it's plural, and it means majesty, of course. It's used of any God, though. It's of gods or deities in general. It's just a general word. It's like the English word God. It can be used of real gods, it can be the real God, or it can be used of fake gods, right? It can be used of idols. It's just a generic word. It's certainly not God's name. So it's the general word. It's used of idols, used of an obstinate, self-confident man. They call those people gods with a little g. A man who despises every god and confides in his own strength and his own sword. Guys like that are called gods in the Bible, with a little g, of course. It was once applied to a king, Psalm 82:1. It's used of angels and judges. Angels and judges, I should say. It's of the true God, of course, of Yahweh God. Now, it's from the root Allah. Yeah, you heard me right. Allah. That's where they get that word, that other religion. Yeah. It's an unused root. The word Allah is not used in, well, there's a sound-alike word for Allah, but the word for God is not used in the biblical text, in the Jewish Bible, we'll put it that way. It is from the root that means to worship a deity. It's to adore. It's to be stunned, to be smitten with reverence, to be smitten with awe. Importantly, it's to be round, hence to be thick, fat, of an abdomen, a belly, or a butt, spelled with two T's. You get it? So the name of the God for the Muslim religion is the guy with the fat butt. Yes. And nowadays, because Americans and Westerners have put their hand over the mouth, they don't want to make that connection anymore. But in the day, when it was, back in the day, back when the Muslim religion was first formed, um, the only people that were around that were fat were the wealthy, the powerful, because they had all the money and they could eat, right? The regular people were all skinny because they had to work real hard on a daily basis. That was the number one thing you worked for, was the food you were going to eat that evening. So the regular people were skinny. And so it was a compliment. It was of wealth and power and all of that stuff. And so they wanted to portray their God as wealthy and powerful, and so they called him the God with the fat butt. It was not derogatory in any way. There's no reason for the Muslims to shy away from that either. Anyway, there's comparators, for instance, El, which means strong and mighty. It means the mighty one, the hero, and they use that word when they speak of gods. Eloha, it's God's majesties. It's used, of course, of the one true God, of all other false gods, whether of men or idols. Properly, the word should be used in the singular of false gods and in the plural of the one true God. False gods are to be referred to in the plural only when there are many of them and or when they are alive in the hearts of their worshippers. False gods only have one attribute. If they are carved with a happy face, they will always have a happy face. The real God has many attributes. He experiences joy, heartbreak, anger, etc. Properly, men should only be spoken of as gods in the plural while they are alive, or when referring to them while they were alive. Men are called gods when they are of high position, when they are valiant, powerful, and especially when they believe their own ability is all they need. But, of course, with a small g, right? Messengers from heaven are often referred to as gods because they are powerful, valiant, and carry out the will of God by God's authority. Okay. Enough said about that. The next word is asher, which in English just means which, W-H-I-C-H, or that. I am the God that did this. I am the God which brought you. You know what I'm saying? Those two words. Then it says Hozetiha, made go out you, very literally. So he's the one that made you go out. It's to go out, to go forth. They use it for germination. You know, when you plant seeds, they germinate, they go forth. To expand as a plant. They use in the sense of going out when speaking of men and other things, especially to go out, to go forth. It's used of soldiers who go to war. And similar, shepherds against wild beasts. They go out against the wild beasts. Out of a city in order to surrender it is to go out. Merchants and sailors for the purpose of trade go out of their ship into the city. You get the idea. Then it says me'eretz, from the land. This really should be thought of as land, not so much as earth. It is arguably the earth. God created the whole heavens and the earth, right? It's the same word for that. But generally, when they use this word, they're speaking of land. And in this case, the next word is Mitzrayim, the land of the Mitzrayim. That's the Egyptians. I made you go out from the land of the Egyptians. Then it says Mi Beit. Mi is from, Beit is house. It's a movable house or a tent back then particularly. It's of a royal house, of a palace, of a fortress. They use the same word for all of those things. The house of God, his temple, is called the house, the Beit, HaBeit. A sepulcher, especially one much adorned, dwelling, abode, habitation, place of any kind. You get the idea, right? But here's the fundamental idea behind it. It is a dwelling place, an abode, a place where a family lives, loves, and grows. Then the next word is avadim. It's imposed servitude. It's of a servant. It's of a slave. It's of the forced servitude of a human being to a whole people and subject to tributary to another. So if you have to pay taxes, you're a servant to the tax man. The servant of the king is used of his ministers, his courtiers, I'm not sure how you say that, figuratively applied in various senses of a worshiper of God, the minister or ambassador of God, called and sent by God for accomplishing some service. So here's a note. The Hebrews, in lowly adulation, call themselves servants, and those to whom they speak, lords. And you get that it came over into the Western world. We'd say, "Oh, thank you, my Lord. I am your humble servant." That stuff came from the Jews. Okay, so here's our translation. We made it through all the words. I am Yahweh your God, who caused you to go out from the land of Mitzrayim, from the house of imposed servitude. This is our first word. Kasuto stated that this verse contained no command, only a proclamation, and later said that this was the first commandment. So first he's saying there's no command here, and then it was like a page later in the same book he's saying it's a commandment. And for those of you who have the book and read it and say, wait a minute, he didn't exactly say that. Yeah, he did, because he said that he agreed with the Ten Commandments as laid out by Judaism. Anyway, Moshe went to the Ziknei, went to the elders. The Ziknei went to the people. The people said, we will do, right? But here, think about what was just said. All of a sudden, God says, I am your God. So let's think about, I am Yahweh your God. Even Ezra said that this declaration, I am Yahweh your God, is the basis of all the commandments and the source of their authority. Okay? Nachmanides thought that since God is used in the singular, it means that he spoke to every individual who was present at Sinai that day. He was obviously not reading it in Hebrew because it's not in singular in Hebrew. Casuto said that it was customary of Eastern kings to announce their name before giving their decrees. He also said, I am your God in the sense that you recognize me and sanctified your life to my service, and I am also your God in the sense that in consideration of this sanctification, I have chosen you to be the people of my special possession from among all the peoples of the earth. Well, that's all flowery and nice. All right, house of imposed servitude. Rashi said, God delivered the children of Israel from the house where they were enslaved. Now, Onkelos said, house of servitude, to avoid the idea that they were delivered from a house where servants were bred. So why is the first commandment? Why is this the first commandment? How is it the first commandment? Well, it isn't. It is the first word. We need to think of the so-called Ten Commandments as the 10 categories. The first category defines everything pertaining to the hearing and acceptance of the one and only covenant with Yahweh. The one and only covenant that Yahweh made with man. Now let's talk about word number 2 because it comes up in the next verse. Word number 2 defines the difference between the real God and fake gods, as well as how, where, and when to worship the real God in contrast to worship of everything else. So verse 3 literally says, not BD, to you, God's other arm faces me. Okay, this was going to take a little explanation. The first word is lo. It's no or it's not. It's the negative article. So something's going to be connected to it. Then it says, ye, yeah. That's really he be, not BB. He be. So it's to be, to exist. When followed by a lamed, let's see if this word is followed by, yes it is. It is followed by a lamed, so this is going to matter here. When followed by a lamed, to be to anyone, used of a thing. In other words, for him as a possessor. So he's telling you that he possesses you. To be for anything, in other words, to serve for or as anything. To be about to be going to be intent upon something, to become, to be made or done, to exist. It's all the things that you would think. But listen, the primary notion is of existence, which comes from that of living, applied to breathing, blowing, which has partly been applied to the meaning of breathing after, desiring, rushing headlong, and partly to that of living and existing. So let's go back and let's think about this. Don't be, I missed a word here somewhere. Don't be, something cannot exist to you. Something cannot be, because the next word is lecha, started with the lamed. You cannot be possessed by. And I'm not talking, your head spinning, pea soup coming out. You cannot be the property of. Then it says, let me look at something before I go on to this. Yeah. So don't be the property of what? Don't be the property of Elohim. What? You can't be the property of God? And remember, it's the plural of majesty. It's the Allah word. It's the hero word. It's all of that kind of stuff. Aherim, other gods. Because they say gods other. They say it in the right order. We say it in the wrong order. other gods. Properly, it's following another, especially one who follows a first or a second. The idea of following, to follow after an example. They say in the following year, next year, right? So don't be possessed by another god. Then it says all, which is upon, when anything is put on the upper part of another, so as to stand or lie upon it. In other words, it's a foundation, it's a substratum. Um, then it says panai, so that's faces me. It's panai is the face, properly the part turned toward anyone, to turn oneself in any direction, to turn oneself. It is from the root panah, to turn oneself in order to go anywhere, hence to turn to or toward a place, to turn oneself away from anyone. Okay. So what's he saying here? Well, he's saying, there shall not exist in you other gods in my presence. They say the panai before the face. If you're before my face, where are you? You are in my presence. So if we're before the face of God, we're in his presence. So he's telling them, you will not be owned by another God in the presence of the real God. You will not stand on, be propped up. Your foundation will not come from another God in the presence of God. Very important. So let's look at that. There shall not exist to you other gods. Rashi said the purpose of this commandment is to make it clear that it is also forbidden for the Yehudim, the Jews, to retain in their possession an idol made by someone else. Okay, it's because he got caught up in all the literal meaning and didn't follow what the Hebrew text was really saying. Kasuto said that the expression other gods was a stereotypical term for the false gods of the Gentiles. Thus, it was not an admission of an existence of other gods. And I think that's important for us to understand. When the Bible talks about other gods, it's not talking about them being the one true God. It's not even saying that they have godly abilities or any of those things. Remember, a God is someone who thinks his strength comes from his own power. A God is somebody of high rank and high position. A guy is someone who is valiant. A God is someone who somebody believes actually has power that doesn't, an idol. Those are all called gods. So you don't build your foundation on those gods. You don't lean on those gods in the presence of the real God. That cannot exist in God's presence. Then it says, in my presence. Even Ezra and the Sepharno say that since God is omnipresent, anywhere idol worship is practiced is in God's presence. This is true. But he said, you won't do it. He didn't say the whole world won't do it. He said, you won't do it. And who's the you? Well, they're the ones where God said, I am your God. Those are the ones who can't do this in God's face. Onkelos translated the Hebrew idiom as in my face, but it's really before my face, but in my presence. All right, so now here's word 2, subcategory A. It's Shemot 20, it's verse 4. Literally it says, not shall make to you image and all semblance that in skies from above, and that in land from beneath, and that in waters from beneath to land. You can kind of figure this one out if you just look it over. So you've got lo, we've already had that word, it's the negative article. Then it says shall make, ta'aseh, shall make. Properly it's to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate, used of a ship, because they fabricate ships, right? They make them. It's an altar of bricks, still fabricated. Of garments, you fabricate garments, you make them. Of a booth or a tent, it's used of God to produce, to create, as in the heavens and the earth. It's to make anything. In other words, to produce it from oneself. It is an expression used of living creatures. like a cow that makes milk, right? To make fat on the loins is said of men growing fat. In like manner, trees are said to make fruit, to acquire by labor, to make a living. To make a living is work. To make or prepare a victim offered to God, that's a sacrifice. To keep a festival day as a Shabbat or the Pesach. Also, to pass or spend time is to abide, to stay somewhere. To wage war, to do the laws or the commandments or the will of God is to do something, to make something. Anyway, I think you get the idea. This is lecha, to you, pesel, image, the graven image of an idol made of wood, and even used of a molten image. Onkelos Shemot, by Drazen and Wagner, said, that which is chiseled, in contrast to a likeness that is two-dimensional. Listen, anything three-dimensional as opposed to one or two-dimensional, that's what we're talking about. What are we talking about? God is telling you you cannot have a three-dimensional image. So is a picture hanging on your wall three-dimensional? No. But if it's one of those things where everything's carved and put in a frame, then that has some 3D images, right? The reason why they're talking about graven and carved and stuff like that is because back in this time, they didn't know the word three-dimensional. They didn't have that concept. It was just carved. It was molten out of metal or whatever. There was engraving done to make it three-dimensional. The whole point is it can't be three-dimensional. All right, this is the whole and all temunah, semblance. So it cannot resemble the appearance of, it's going to give you a list of things, asher, which bashamayim, it cannot resemble anything that's in the skies, the heavens, the firmament, that which is seen and spread out like a vault over the globe, as supported on foundations and columns. That comes from some teaching from way back, whence the rain is let down as through doors or floodgates, and above which the abode of God and the angels was supposed to be, heaven and the heaven of the heavens. All you need to know about Hashamayim, it's the skies. What's in the skies above us? Birds. Birds fly in the sky. You can't have anything in the semblance of a bird. And this is Mima'al, that are from above, the skies above. Properly, that which is above you, which upward. This is Ba'asher, and which Ba'aretz, which are in the earth. Mitachat, that are beneath. What are they beneath? The earth is beneath the skies. Ba'asher, and that which Ba'mayim, which is in the water. Mitachat, which is beneath La'aretz, the water is below the ground, right? Because, you've heard of sea level. Your ground is so many feet above sea level. If you're below sea level, what's on top of the ground? Water. So the water is supposed to be under the ground. That's what you follow, because the water is below the ground that you walk on. So down here, the water, that's what they're talking about. So, you shall not make for yourself a 3D image in the semblance of anything that flies in the air above, that walks, crawls, or slithers on the land below, or anything that walks, crawls, or slithers, or swims in the waters beneath the land. If it eats, drinks, breathes, slithers, crawls, swims, walks, or flies, you cannot have anything three-dimensional that matches any of that that's in three-dimensional form. Saadia took the words "for yourself" out to avoid the idea that we could create an image for someone else. If you can't have it for yourself, you should automatically know that you can't make it for someone else either. So if you're not allowed to have a carved fish, or a carved bird. Way back before all this started for Dawn and I, we decorated one of our houses and we had, what was that bird? I always called it my duck. We had a crane. It was all carved out about 2 feet, 2.5 feet, 2.5 feet tall. We had it sitting by the fireplace, I think. And then on the fireplace, we had a couple of fish. And it reminded us of when we went on our honeymoon to Cancun. And they were carved out pink and blue, teal looking fish, right? That we laid on, set on the deal. Well, then when you become observant, you're like, oh, okay, God said we can't have that kind of stuff, right? So are we allowed to give that stuff to our children? No. Are we allowed to give it to our friends? No. Can we give it to the thrift store? Yeah, you can give it to the thrift store as long as you're doing it anonymously. But you don't want to give that to somebody who knows that you don't live that kind of lifestyle. Because what are you saying when you don't do it, but you give it to someone else? You're saying it's not okay for me, but it's okay for you. That's not how you teach them that they ought to be living like us, right? All right. So, word 2, part B, is found in verse 5. Literally, it says, not shall bow down to them, and not shall serve them, for I am Yahweh, God's you, God zealous, visit guilt fathers on children, on third and on fourth to hate me. All right, that was a little tough. So we start off with no or not, the negative article. Then it says, tish tach veh. You will not bow down, to sink low, be depressed, to not as in like, well, you could say depressed is to be bowed down or sunken low if you think of mental depression, but it's more, the idea of depressed is the smushing down. To give place, in other words, to give in mentally or emotionally. You can't do those things. A good example of that is when our family first realized, we were starting to we were converting into Judaism and all that kind of stuff. Everybody wanted us to come to the Christmas party. Everybody wanted us to come to this, that, or the other, and we gave in it early on. We would go to my mother's house, and there'd be a gigantic Christmas tree there. And when we finally realized, hey, we can't go and celebrate this holiday with them because they're literally worshiping idols here, well, then we eventually realized we couldn't bow down to that. We couldn't give in to that emotionally. We couldn't give into it mentally. We couldn't give into it for the sake of peace or any of those kind of things. We had to cut that cord because that's bowing down to an idol. Not, I mean, they do mean physical as well. You can't bow to it physically, but you can't bow to it inside either. This is lachem. You can't bow to them. Velo, and not ta'av dem. You won't serve them either. To serve is to labor, it's to work, it's to do work. It's of a thing to bestow labor on anything. So it's someone who makes you work. Go wash them dishes. That's to bestow labor on them. Maybe you didn't make them, but you told them to, and they did it. So you bestowed labor upon them. It's to till a field, a vineyard, a garden, right? It's what you think of as doing work. You won't serve them. I think I have a note about that later. I hope I do. So I hate to say it now and then it be there later. Well, let me say it now. If it's later, I'll just skip it. If you go into a restaurant, and you'll find this in Chinese restaurants, you are walking up to the door and they got graven images of lions on each side. Are you allowed to go in there? No. You walk up, there's no images. So you walk in the door and they got a great big Buddha right there in the front. Are you allowed to go order food? No. Sit down at the restaurant, you look around, you don't see anything, and you're halfway through your meal and you look up, you notice there's an idol you didn't see before sitting right there at your table. Do you ever go back? I mean, it's too late at that point. You've already eaten your meal, right? Because that happened to us once. You just can't go back. You can't go to a place where there's idols. Why? Because if you eat that food, you're giving those people money, and it furthers the cause of that idol. It came to light to me when I was at a place where there was these idols, and this woman walked in. She was big, pregnant, and she had her little girl with her, who was, I don't know, 4 years old or so. And the little girl asked what that idol was, and the mother said, "Oh, well, we worship it, and we bow down to it, and we bring it little gifts, and we light it, and we pray to it, and then if he hears our prayer, then he will heal us," because it was a medical place. I got up and left because I had an epiphany that day. Wow. When you go into places like that have idols, and you purchase from them, and you spend your money in that place, you further the purpose of that idol. All right, so that's how you serve an idol. This is for he, which means for or because. Anochi, that's me, myself, and I. Gives the proper name of God, Yahweh. Eloheha, your God. Uh, then it says, we would say, is a zealous God. But remember, they say it in the right order, so there's God zealous, right? So now he's using the word El here. Strong, mighty hero, the mighty one. I'm your hero, I'm your God, and I am Kana. I am zealous. But what do you read every time you read something in the Bible? Jealous. It always says jealous. Why? Because when the English translations were first translated, people were more likely to use the word jealous to mean zealous in that time period than they are now. Because now we think of jealous as someone who's a rival of somebody else, somebody who is like a smitten lover, not smitten, but a jilted lover, and he becomes jealous and that kind of stuff. And we think of that word in that way. But kana also meant to burn with zeal for any person or thing, to be zealous for anyone's cause. And that's the one you're supposed to connect here. So when Oprah Winfrey tells her story about going to that church that day and hearing that preacher say, "I am a jealous God," and it hit her in that moment, jealous? What's God got to be jealous of with me? Well, he's not a jealous God in that way. He's a zealous God. So she ran from God, invented a whole new religion, and has led millions of people astray because a man who was not qualified to teach got up there and appointed himself a teacher and decided to teach, and he led that woman astray. He's more in trouble for what followed with Oprah than Oprah is. Not that Oprah's not going to pay for what she's done, because what she's done is awful. But that's what happens. People get up and do things and don't explain things properly, and then people run off and do things like Oprah did. But this is that God is a zealous God. He's zealous for our cause. Rashi, Sadia, and even Ezra all agree that God is zealous in punishment of those who commit idolatry rather. But their emphasis was on the wrong syllable. God is zealous for his people. He burns for zeal for his people. It had nothing to do with the punishment. Then it says poked. So he's going to visit. Now he's going to tell you what the punishment is. Poked is to strike upon or against any person or thing. In a good sense, is to go to any person or thing to visit, to inquire as to their welfare, to go in order to inspect or explore, hence to search. Doesn't he search out the heart? Doesn't he come and visit? Yeah, he does all those things. So it can be either way, right? Then it says avon, guilt. Ooh, so he's going to visit guilt. So this is the negative. So you do have to take this part in the negative. Well, they say perversity, depravity, a depraved action, a crime, a sin. It is often guilt contracted by, they said sinning. What is that? Sinning is rebellion against the Torah, people. Now, here's something I'm going to tell you Jews that don't ever tell anyone I told you. Don't ever tell a Christian that you know that. Actually, I'm telling you this so you can tell a Christian. Let me take that. Listen, Christians, what do they say to every Jew? Oh, you guys are under the law. We're not under the law. We're under grace, right? Here's what you have to memorize. Every Jew needs to memorize this. It's a verse from the Christian Bible. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. Every Jew needs to memorize it. You need to know this by heart. What does it say? I don't know. I didn't write it down. Give me a Bible, somebody. I didn't think you write it down. Let's look it up. I got a Christian Bible right here. That's John. That's not 1 John. Where is 1 John? I don't even know. Yeah, here's a John. 1 John. Oh, I don't have the right glasses either. Oh, that's 2 John. That's why there's no chapter 3. I'll get to the right place because I don't have my glasses on. Okay. Everyone who commits sin transgresses also the Torah, because sin is Torah, rebellion. You hear me, Jews? You need to memorize this. You need to chisel this in stone somewhere. Everyone who commits sin, let's say it this way, everyone who commits sin rebels against the Torah, because sin is Torah, rebellion. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. It's the best explanation of what sin is, and by the way, what sin is not, that I've ever read anywhere at any time. And that comes from the New Testament. Isn't it funny that that's the group of people who reject God's law? But you need to know that so you can toss that out at them when they start that nonsense. Anyway, the next word is avot, fathers. I'm not going to go through a lot of information on that. You know what fathers are. But I will say this. The idea of father as one who nourishes is not found in the biblical text. In biblical culture, the mother nourished the children. The father rarely had anything to do with the children. It's why the story of Joseph, what was his father's name? No. Anyway. I'm just drawing a blank. I don't know why. I wouldn't normally draw a blank here. Joseph, the guy with the coat of the many colors, his father was very touchy-feely, very nourishing of he and his brother. And his older brothers couldn't understand this. Now, his older brothers are from another mother. So, and all of it, maybe it's not another mother, but at least it predates his finding God. So they, Isaac, Jacob. No, it's not. Why am I so blank? That bothers me. Yaakov? Jacob? I don't know. I absolutely have no memory at this point. I don't know why. Anyway, his father obviously loved his two youngest sons. And it was so weird to his older siblings that if you read the story, you'll be like, wow, they couldn't even understand why their father was acting this way. Because this was not normal. So father was not used in that way. It was used of origin. All right, then this is all. Remember, that's the on something, the substratum and all that. And this is banim, on the children. Banim is b'nai in plural. It's used to children of both sexes, the children of Yisrael, right? The descendants. But it's mostly used for sons. Now, the thing I want to point out, though, here, I think that's important. is, let's see what if I can find it. Son is applied to a subject, rendering obedience to a king or lord, as to a father. In other words, he's obeying his king as if the king is his father. Metaphorically, a son of death is one doomed to die, and as if delivered into the dominion of death. A son of stripes is one who's doomed for stripes. This is an obstinate young man who's constantly getting in trouble and constantly receiving stripes. They would have called him the son of stripes. A foster son was someone that was brought up like a son. A disciple was called a son, as much as teachers were treated with reverence and obedience like parents and received the title of father. So Yeshua would have been called the father of his Talmudim, the father of his disciples, right? Uh, it, if you think of the school of the prophets, that was not a school where people went to learn how to be a prophet. It's just that the prophet himself had disciples. Think of the story of Jesus and his disciples if you don't know anything else to connect it to. But in that story, you've got this man that walks around. He's got 12 followers. Well, the school of the prophets of the Nevi'im would have been exactly like that. Your prophet had people who followed him and studied under him. They would have treated him like their father, and they would have called him their father. And he would have called them his sons. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, so the son is someone who does what the father does, obeys the father, and thus lives. And when you're a rabbi and you're ordaining, if you will, your talmudim, your students, your disciples, they become your friend. They become a rabbi like yourself. You give them papers. All the way back in the first century. That's what they did. They gave them papers. You literally had to have papers proving that you were a rabbi. If you did not have those, you'd be dragged into the nearest synagogue and be given stripes for teaching the law of God without the right to teach such things. Yeah, it was really like that. Okay, so the son of the prophet was someone who became a prophet. He did what the prophet did. Okay. Then it says on or upon. We've had that word sheleshim, the third, on the third. Most people add generation after that, but it doesn't say generation. It implies it. It doesn't say it. And on ribeim, the fourth generation, is implied. Leshonai. Literally, that's to hate thee. We would say that hate thee. It's to hate, it's revulsion, it's disgust, dislike, distaste, nausea, horror, loathing. It's all those things, whether of persons or things, a hater, an enemy. Okay, so what did God just say in verse 5? You will not bow down to them. Who are the them? The man-made images, the 3D images. And you will not serve them. I am Yahweh, your God, a zealous God, who visits the guilt of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation who hate me. So you shall not serve. To purchase food, services, or goods, this is what I was saying earlier, from religious persons or organizations is to serve their false god. Bowing the head, folding the hands together like pagans, is serving their false god. So when we go to a rodeo, they always ask us to bow our head and pray. We never bow our heads. We never fold our hands together. We just stand there and try not to be noticed. Because we love the rodeo, but we're not going to go down the pagan idol worshiping road with them. So we don't do that. Now, I've talked about the Chinese place. Now, let's talk about something a little closer to home. Let's talk about Chick-fil-A. They wear their religion on their sleeve. They are not open on Sunday. They won't bow down to the government when the government's trying to make them do things that go against their religion, right? So this is, in all intents and purposes, a religion, a religious organization. I mean, they are not a 501c. They are a for-profit business. I get that, but they wear their, they live according to their religion. That is a place that literally is forbidden to those of us whose God is Yahweh. And it says he visits. Remember, he visits the guilt. Even Ezra said that visiting was equal to remembering the sins of the fathers. And he said that should be taken, that sins of the fathers should be taken out on their wicked children. Wow. Maimonides said that the penalty inflicted on the fathers would be felt by their children. So he's trying to lighten that load a little bit. Onkelos Shemot by Drazina Wagner says the following. The Targumist adds, upon the rebellious children. He's adding this to the text. And when the children continue to sin as their fathers, evading the erroneous view that innocent children are punished for their parents' sins. The principle that each person is punished for his own iniquity is clearly articulated in Yirmiyahu 31:30 and Ezekiel 18:20. The Babylonian Talmud in Berachot 7a, Sanhedrin 27b, and Makot 24a maintains that this statement in the Decalogue refers to children who follow the iniquitous practices of their parents. And this is correct. The children are not punished for the sins of their fathers. But think about what's happening here. If I grow up in a household where my parents smoke, what am I most likely going to do when I grow up? I'm most likely going to be a smoker. If I grow up in a household where my parents are heavy drinkers, I'm probably going to grow up to be a drinker. That's all I'm saying when I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay, we're going to have to break here, and we'll pick up with verse 6 next week. Shalom, shalom, y'all.